Hello parents, my name is Steve from McGraw-Hill Education, and today we're going to take a look at some of the resources available in your California Impact grades 6 through 12 History Social Science program that are available to you as parents to use at home during this time of distance learning in the schools. The good thing about what we're going to be looking at today is even though you can see that I'm in an 8th grade U.S. history course, is that the structure of all of the websites for grades 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 through 12 are all organized the same way, and they will have the same resources. So if you have more than one child in a school and you're looking at their history social science materials, they should all look the same way. Let's start by organizing ourselves around here and taking a look at what's available here on the dashboard. So the dashboard will clearly, of course, tell you what grade you're in, the title of the course. But then in the bottom right-hand corner, we're going to start to see some of the resources. So I'm going to scroll down here slowly so you can see what these resources are. So there's these 5 that are pretty common on every student's page. And so let's talk about those briefly so you can think about how you may use those at home. First, let's start at the bottom with something called BTW. BTW stands for by the way. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and open it up. And it opens a separate tab in your student's browser. And what it is a current events site. A lot of history teachers like to teach with current events and support those, making connections to the things that the student is learning about the past and things that are happening today. And I need to tell you that when they turn on the news these days, it tends to be all about one topic. So this is a way to look at current events from lots of different topics. So you can see there's going to be, and is currently a lot of information on the election. Should you like to have your student read about something along those lines. But as I scroll down here, you'll see in the categories section and the tags section that I can filter these current events articles along lots of different topics. Now, I was in an 8th grade course, so let's say I wanted to have some further discussions and reading on United States history and geography. So I could come over here, click on history and geography, and I could see an article here on Constitution, filibuster, Black history in America, etc., etc. Here's one on Hurricane Katrina, which I believe happened before any of the students in our classes was born. So all of these could be very interesting things for kids to read up on, and then perhaps report out to you or have discussions on that. So that's BTW, by the way, and that is kept current by McGraw-Hill. Different articles are released every week or so to help you with that. You can see this one is Monday, April 6th. So these are kept very current. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to where we were. So that is the BTW. Above those are other widgets that provide access into the content. You'll notice that these 3 all have the bar across the bottom that says interactive ebook, which means that when a student opens one of these documents, they can actually interact with the text itself, complete their answers, and put those online so they can save those. So I'm going to go, the first thing is one of the things that you're probably going to get the most use out of from a parental perspective is the interactive student edition. So let me click into that and we'll watch as that loads. This is, for all intent and purpose, a web-based version of the student textbook itself. So not to worry if your child was unable to bring home their textbook. This is an electronic version of that textbook. Now the layout is different than they would see in their physical textbook, but the content is all there. Now if you can follow my cursor with your eye, you can see over in the upper right-hand corner, there's an icon for a microphone, which, as I'm sure you've correctly guessed, means that this will read aloud to the students. So that's one thing that you may wish to utilize when you're looking through here. As I scroll down, or go to other pages, let's go to a different page. In fact, why don't I show you how to use the menu? We'll come over here to the menu, click on that, and I can navigate through the book. I'm going to guess that for most of your students, they were in the latter chapters of the history text when school was interrupted. So let's go into chapter 15, the Civil War. So I'm going to click on that, and I go to the chapter introduction, and we're seeing Honest Abe there. And so now we're starting to look at the content that is in the textbook itself. So this is one way for your student to have access to their textbook, all of the pictures, again, the ability to read aloud in this, and some other additional benefits. So let me get into some of the text itself. Here's a map on the Civil War, also very interesting. And we'll go a couple more pages in. So here we are into lesson 1, for example, in the textbook. One of the benefits of the interactive textbook itself is it does allow the student to do this, which is annotate and or highlight their textbook. So if I thought that this particular sentence was something that I wanted to comment on or perhaps remember, I could drag my cursor across it, add a highlight in a variety of different colors. Let's put a pink highlight on that. Or I could make notes in adding a note. In fact, there's a variety of functions. I could have it read to me. I could put a bookmark here so I could come back to this. But this is one of the interactive features that we were speaking of earlier. This can be very helpful for students as they read through some rather dense text and they want to make notes on things to come back or might make comments about what they've read in their textbook. Something that they aren't capable of doing in their physical textbook. We can't have students writing in textbooks, but this is a great way for them to do that in their interactive textbook. And every student has their own version of this. So when I am making my highlights here, my fellow classmates are not seeing those. Those are just the ones that are on my textbook alone. And they will remain there until I remove them. So I'm going to go ahead and click off that, and you can see I could go to the next page. Let's go to page 181 and continue reading into lesson 2. And then I remember, oh, wait a minute, didn't I see something like that in the last lesson? I go back, and there's my highlight, and that's still there. So just a couple of the features of the interactive student edition, which again is found here on the very first page of the dashboard. Another tool that's available here on the dashboard is something called the Inquiry Journal. That's something that your child's teacher may be using in the classroom. I'll go ahead and open that up for us. And you can see this is not so much a classic homework piece, but can and often is used in the classroom as a follow-along document for teacher instructions. But that's not to say that you as a parent can make use of this as well. For example, in asking your students to engage around what are called the essential questions. I think that McGraw-Hill has done a particularly nice job of writing these essential questions as thought points to help students and teachers think about the history that they're about to learn and building connections to their own lives. For example, this one from our chapter on the Civil War, the essential question is about how new ideas change the way that people live. And you and I know that there are new ideas that are changing the way that people live every day. And this is something that a student can speak to, a student can think about, and then you as the adults in their world can build the connections back to the history topic that they are studying about. So that's just one way to use the interactive journal. Notice that because it is interactive, there are text boxes and students can enter their text right in here. So here we go. And once again, as you can see in the right there, it is auto-saving as we go. There's no reason to hit a save button. And this will be there for your student when they go and they click off this page and they come back. That should always still be there. And they have the opportunity to clear that off, which I'm going to do right now. So to restart there. Notice over on the right-hand side, it says saving and saved. So as they're going through that, they can respond to whatever it is they're reading about, talking about, thinking about, putting their own research questions in this part. So that's the interactive inquiry journal and the interactive student edition. I'm going to save the Adaptive Learning Smartbook for when we go into an actual chapter. And so why don't we do that now? So I'm going to scroll back up to the top and browse our course. I'm going to do that by clicking right here. It opens up the chapters for our course. I'm going to go back to that chapter on chapter 15 for the Civil War and click into that. As that loads, you can see that at the chapter level in California Impact, there's always going to be these same 5 headings. We've got student editions, chapter introduction, activities, review, and Spanish resources. When I open the student editions by clicking on this arrow to the right, you're going to see not just the interactive student ebook that we looked already, but a print version of the student ebook. What's the difference, what you would say? So the print student ebook is going to look and feel very much like their actual print textbook. So were they to turn to page 159, say, in their print book, and turn 159 in their student ebook, they should look exactly the same. So this would be a true electronic version of that print student book, as opposed to the interactive book, which is organized more like a web page, but it also has those additional features of allowing the student to have the text read aloud to them, allowing the student to make annotations and highlights. Here, once again, is that inquiry journal in an interactive format and an inquiry journal in print format. Now would be a good time to talk about the Adaptive Learning SmartBook. This is another way to access the book. There's another video on how specifically to use this Adaptive Learning SmartBook, so I'm just going to talk in brief terms about what it is and how you could possibly use that in the home environment, because this could very well be a very interesting resource for that. Quickly, what the Adaptive Learning SmartBook does is it opens up a version of the student textbook, not unlike this print student version, and it places highlights, yellow highlights specifically, on the most important concepts of the chapter and the lesson for your student. So it really functions as an electronic study guide for the child. So they open up the book, and I'll go ahead and do that for you, and they can see their textbook and the text that's within, and the text that has been determined to be the most important portions of that lesson are highlighted in yellow. We'll give this a moment to load. Here we go, Chapter 15, Civil War. Downloading. So while we're waiting for this to load, this can be a very useful tool to assist students in their reading of the text and their focus on their study. And here it comes, loading content. There's a tutorial for the first time to use it. I'm just going to click through that pretty quickly here. Thank you. And click on Anonymous. And here's my book again. So I'm going to come over here. This is a little bit too big, so I want to see this smaller. I'm going to come down to the bottom right-hand corner, make the text a little smaller. And you can see that this is the book pretty much as it looks like in print form. I'm going to go into lesson 1. And when I click into lesson 1, boom, right away you can see that this portion of the lesson has been highlighted in yellow. So that's telling me, the learner, that this is the portion that when I am reading the text, this is what I need to focus on. So as I'm reading along, I'm going to focus on that. I go to the next page, not so much in the yellow section here, so I'll skim through that. I go to the next page, not so much here. I go to the next page, and we'll start to see more yellow text appear later on. Then, as a student, when I feel that I have accessed most of the content for that chapter, then I can go and click on Practice in the bottom left-hand corner, and the software will ask me questions. Not only will it ask me questions about what I've just read, but it'll ask me for my confidence level. I know this, I think I know it, I'm unsure, or I have no idea. So the student is prompted to answer a question. Let's just pick this first one and say, yes, I know this. And yay, I was correct. So it'll tell them if they were correct. It'll tell them that if they were incorrect, follow my cursor to the left, and they can also get reports on their level of success. I can get a report on my current learning status, my topic scores, all kinds of information. So fundamentally, I'm going to close out of this. What this LearnSmart does, it's a version of the student textbook that pretty much tells your child what they should be reading, ask them questions about what they've read, and then we'll report back to them how they're doing on that. So that could be a very useful tool in this distance learning environment. Your child's teacher can assign this for the student, but as you can see, the student could go ahead and access that on their own. So I'm going to go ahead and close that section there and go take a look at some of the other sections. Chapter Introduction, let's take a look at what's under there. You'll usually see a video called the Chapter Opener that will walk students through that. That's something that can be easily accessed and is good. I'm going to discuss this very briefly. The place and time section is a map paired with a timeline. And This is good for geography skills as well as helping students to orient themselves in terms of time and place. For example, time and place, the Civil War of the United States in 1861 to 1865. It's important to know that that's what was going on, of course, in the United States at that time, but something that would be very helpful for students to do is think about what was happening in other places in the world, perhaps, from 1861 to 1865. What was happening in the European continent, for example? What was happening in Asia or Australia or across the world? Really helping students to think time and place, geography, and how it relates to a timeline. So there's that aspect here in chapter introduction. I'm going to go ahead and close that and click on chapter activities, open that up, and now you'll start to see some of the other additional resources that are available for students and parents. So I've got an additional activity here and my chapter review piece that I could work on there. So that's at the chapter level. The next thing that I'm going to have us do is go ahead and take a look at the lessons that make up chapter 15. To do that, I'm going to come over here with my cursor, come over to this pull-down menu on the left-hand side, and go into Early Years of the War, Lesson 2. So I'm going to go ahead and let that load. You'll notice that the visually doesn't change quite a bit, but you can see down here that while I still have 5 elements, they are different. My student additions are the same. We've already seen those. But now my lesson activities are going to be very different. So for example, here under Interactive Student Resources, if I open that up, I'm going to see the lesson broken down into sections. So I have the introduction of the lesson here. I could open that. I have a graphic organizer that I could open and use and interact with to take notes as I go through the lesson itself. And then the 3 sub areas of the lesson are laid out here: War on Land and Sea, War in the Eastern States, and the Emancipation Proclamation, and then final review. So this is a small chunked out piece of the lesson itself that would be very appropriate for students to go through piece by piece and use the review and the graphic organizer to help organize their thinking as they work through the lesson. To further assist students with the lesson, I would direct your attention here to the presentation in the upper right-hand corner. This presentation, and I'll go ahead and launch that, starts out with the video, but I could navigate down here on the bottom right-hand corner and go to other aspects of the presentation. These are the elements that perhaps a teacher is using or would have used in an in-class presentation for the day. So what it does is it very neatly lays out in order the way that the lesson was designed to be taught. So I could start out with a map, for example, in this particular lesson, move on to the next resource, which is a story about the ironclad, some of the boats that were used in the battles in the Civil War. So these are short text pieces of information, again, used to support the instruction that is going on for the particular lesson. And teachers can edit those and change those, and then the students immediately have those edits and changes as they're working through their resources. So those could be very interesting for parents to use as well. Then next we'll go into the lesson activities, projects, and worksheets. Open up and we see there, here we go, have a video on the Emancipation Proclamation. Now one thing I did want to point out, and I'll go backwards one step to make this very clear, is that let's say this graphic organizer here, Early Years of the War, I can open that up. I'm going to let that load. And analyzing key ideas and details. So I'm going to have an interactive graphic organizer here. So I could put down Civil War battles. What were the Civil War battles in 1861? I could type in there 1862, 1863, and complete this document. But what I wanted to point out was that this document, while the student can complete this, they cannot submit it to their teacher for any credit unless the teacher has turned it into an assignment. Now, how will you know if your student has assignments? That's going to be back on the dashboard page. So if a student is completing assignments for their teacher, then they will be here under the calendar. You'll notice that my calendar is empty for this day. So those would be assignments, tasks that the teacher has set. The student could open the resource, complete the resource, and then submit it back to the teacher for credit. What we just did with the graphic organizer was something that would be parent controlled. The student can still go in, enter their text, but you as the parent might want to evaluate it or comment back with your student when they're done. So just to recap what we've looked at today from the parent perspective, we looked at the widgets that come on the front page. We have the BTW, which is current events, the interactive student edition, which reads aloud to the student and allows them to annotate and highlight, the inquiry journal for discussion points, browsing into the course. I can go into a chapter level here, and there are resources that are available at the chapter level. And we looked at a couple of those. And then there are other resources that are further available at the lesson level. I'm going to go ahead and click into here. We looked at early years of the war. And then we're at the lesson level. And you can see those windows are still left open, and it tells me very clearly that I'm at the lesson level. So I hope this was of value, and that as parents you have a few extra tools that you can use to keep your students engaged and centered around their history content. Hope to see everybody back in school safely as soon as possible. Thank you very much.